So the first stage is love bombing, and that is when they reel you in. That's such a great question. I'm so glad you asked it. They are 100% the most insecure person in the room. Our needs are to be seen, to be heard, and to be accepted just the way we are.
And it doesn't help that modern parents simply give iPads to the kids so they don't bother them, and then these kids grow up without real attention, never learning how to feel seen, only
Yep.
learning how to apply temporary band-aids to deep emotional scars.
We can't continue to blame other people for relationships that don't work.
These are the people who film themselves giving food and money to homeless people so that they can bathe in this admiration they get online.
Narcissists will also go to a therapist to learn how to be a better narcissist. Think of gangs. Gangs are surrogate families.
Yeah.
Okay? So there's a young boy who...
Michele, has the rise of social media made us more narcissistic? Or has it simply given a platform to people who've always had such tendencies, but now are simply broadcasting the need for validation to a wider audience?
It's like the chicken and the egg, okay? So, as I understand it through my training, through my lived experiences, we are not born narcissists. It is not genetic. It is epigenetic. So it's a response to our environment. It's a personality adaptation. It's actually a trauma response. So I'm a recovering people pleaser, which is another personality adaptation. And I'm the perfect target for a narcissist, but that's another story, which we may get to. However, to answer your question, it's not so much that we're more narcissistic. It's that it's applauded. We cheerlead it now because of the society that we live in, certainly in the West, my country, the US and the UK, we applaud success at any cost, step over people, elbow people out of the way, be ruthless just so you get to the top. We have the 1% now that have all the money, and the rest of us are just worker bees. So, and then social media has given this other platform. So you have a lot of narcissistic people, for example, on TikTok and on Instagram, because it's the perfect platform for them. And it feeds into their need for supply, because a narcissist, if I may show you my little diagram here, my trusted little Post-it note. This is the narcissist, and this is the supply wheel. And if you know a narcissist, you're in relationship with one, platonic, romantic, business, you are on their supply wheel. And you're there as long as you have something that they need. So for a narcissist on social media, it's all the dopamine downloads, all the hits that they get from the likes and the comments and the follows, and it just feeds into it more and more. So do we have more narcissists now? Yes, because we promote it and we welcome it. We do, whether we want to realize that or not. Also, more of them come out from behind the curtain that have always been there, but they've been what is called a covert narcissist, which I can explain more of that if you wish as we go along.
Right. So it has amplified those who were already openly, or in a way, narcissists, but then all those who were, because it's something is frowned upon, is not that narcissism is openly accepted in society. So now suddenly this is the tool, this is the tool that these people have to finally get what they wanted from more people than they could ever imagine. It's fascinating.
Yes, and we don't call it narcissism. We call it success. We call it, So this might be a good time to just tell you there are 4 different types of narcissists. And then that will help to explain the one I just mentioned coming up from behind the curtain. So there's what I call the classic narcissist, the overt narcissist. Those are the ones that you see. Those are the ones that maybe leaders of countries. I'm not getting political. That's a different conversation, but they may be leaders of countries. They're usually found in C-suite of corporates. They might be in the military. They might be, because statistically, these areas that I'm mentioning have higher levels of narcissism. Hollywood. So they are grandiose, entitled, delusional. These are the adjectives that are usually used for an overt narcissist, and they will be, very charismatic. They can walk into a room and everybody just thinks they're amazing and gravitates towards them. So they're easy to see. And if you think about it, you'll probably know one or know of one. Even if you don't know them personally, you can think of a film, The Talented Mr. Ripley. Great example of a narcissist. There's then the covert narcissist, which would be more the other terms for that narcissist would be vulnerable, um, and they are more hidden. So they have the same traits, but they're not obvious. So they will be more like, poor me. No one understands me. If I only had rich parents, I would have had a great education and I would be so successful. So you'll notice a pattern here with all narcissists. Everything is everybody else's fault. They take no responsibility for the outcome of their behavior. Then there's what's called the malignant narcissists. So they are quite dangerous. They will probably be sociopathic. Uh, the easiest way to describe them is, think of death row. Those are the people on death row. They will, I mean, there's been a lot of research and testing on people on death row, especially males, and they've all pretty much presented as narcissists. And the malignant aspect means they're more dangerous. They will kill, they will really hurt you, they will take you out. Not always kill you, but they will destroy you, definitely destroy you. And the final one is called a communal narcissist. And you will see them on Instagram. Sometimes you'll see them on Instagram. So be this, let's say, this very made up, beautiful young woman, to camera, and she's at a dog shelter saving a dog, and so it's this message of, look at me while I do something really good. And you'll find them a lot in charitable organizations where they're like, no one realizes how hard I work. I've earned, or I've raised tens of thousands of dollars for this organization, but I don't get the credit for it. That you'll find them in cults. They'll be leaders of cults. So they appear to be doing good, but everything comes back to them. Does
Right.
that make sense? Does that?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. And I was thinking, as you just said, many of these spaces that attract a lot of narcissism, these are male dominated spaces. So why is it that men, particularly men under 30 years old, that are more likely to be narcissists as compared to women or even other men but of older age?
Well, that's an interesting question because it's not so much that there are more men. I think men are more obvious because they tend to be overt narcissists. And this is a not a hardwired statistic, but sort of a straw poll. Women tend to be more covert. They tend to be more hidden. They might be hidden behind motherhood, for example. They might be hidden behind a habit as a nun, or they're not as grandiose. They're not as obvious. So what happens is that the the narcissist develops two ends of a spectrum, because people say, how do people become a narcissist? Well, you're not born a narcissist, and I absolutely believe this, and there's very little evidence to disprove this. So the child is reacting to their environment when they're born, and the between the ages of 0 and 3 is when we really uh, start developing our personality. And if you think about it, we are pre-verbal, so we can't communicate, and it really has this can have a very detrimental effect on us if our needs aren't met. And when I say, and this will make sense in a moment, our needs are to be seen, to be heard, and to be accepted just the way we are. We're like 0 to 3 years old. We know nothing. We can't communicate. That sounds very simple, but a lot of children don't get their needs met. And I don't blame parents. I'm one myself, so I know I've made some mistakes. But it's things like, it could be mental health issues, socioeconomic issues, physical health issues. The parent is not securely attached to their caregiver, their parent figure. So they repeat the pattern with their child. So what happens is, certainly with narcissism, I'll focus on that outcome. Um, that child that doesn't get their needs met unconsciously realizes that there are other ways to get their needs met by trying it out, So they realize that there are people out there that they can take things from. And I'm going to be very simplistic here. They're more like takers. So this works and it continues to work, and then they grow up and they develop more, and there's more people. They realize that it can be very successful. They can get a lot of people. They can create this supply wheel, and they can keep interchanging people with the different supplies that they need. And there's 4 supplies, just very briefly. There's one of the supplies is sex. Certainly in a relationship, one of the supplies is supply. So supply would be things like money, social status. I'm talking about the person that they will couple with, um, inheritance, perhaps something like that. Then there's safety, and safety would be a monogamy. Uh, the woman or the man won't leave the relationship because they're loyal and they're monogamous, and they are in it for the long haul, no matter what happens. And then the final one is service, in no particular order. Service could look like a PA, like you married a PA or you're in a relationship with a PA. They do everything for you. I know, because I work with couples, I see some of this. So they make their meals and they iron their clothes and they drive them places and they manage their diary and stuff like that. So this child grows up to, need some of those things. And allegedly, a narcissist will hold on to a supply as long as they have 2 of those 4 things that they need. And when they drop beneath 2, they go somewhere else. They're out. So back to how a narcissist develops.
Yeah.
That's one direction that they can go. And the other end of the spectrum is what's called the golden child syndrome. So this child has been spoiled, mollycoddled, protected. Their feet hardly touch the ground, right? Everything is done for them. And they get the idea that they are the center of the universe because that's the way they've been raised.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of that is actually the projection of the parent figure onto the child to live vicariously through their life, if you know what I mean.
Exactly, yes.
Right? So it's in the image of them. And so that it's very transactional. So the child, if the parent figure, and I use the term parent figure because not all of us are raised by biological parents.
Correct.
It's just more precise to do it that way. So they, like let's say the parent wanted to go to Oxford and wasn't able to go to Oxford. So their dream is their child is going to go to Oxford. So they push them academically. And the transaction is the better the child does academically, the more the child is loved and feted and kept on this pedestal. If they went in the direction of athletics, not so much. The parent would be disappointed. So these are all very transactional personality adaptations based on things outside of ourselves.
I mean, wow, it just sounds so tricky to navigate, either as a parent or even as an individual. There's just so many things going on, and it doesn't help that modern parents simply give iPads to the kids so they don't bother them, and then these kids grow up without real attention, never learning how to feel seen, only
Yeah,
learning how to apply temporary band-aids to deep emotional scars. It's truly awful.
it is. And are you familiar with the recent series called Adolescence
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
on?
I haven't
Okay.
seen it, but I know the gist of it. Yeah, I've heard a lot.
Okay. Well, people have different opinions on what it meant, but I'll share my opinion because I think it aligns very well with what you just
Okay.
said. My opinion is it's nothing profound. It's just that I've believed this for years, and then when I saw Adolescence, I was like, there it is. I think it is absent fathers. Now, I'm not blaming fathers. Please, I
Yeah.
mean, being a parent is one of the hardest things to do. But I think, again, the societal norm is that we accept that men can have many children with many women
Mhm.
and not necessarily be there for them. And the other side of that, well, there are many sides to it. Another possibility or scenario is that a father is physically in situ, but emotionally not there. And I believe that's the one that was present in adolescence. And I'm sorry, I hope I don't ruin this for you, spoil it for you. But, there was this lovely family that were building, they had this great house. They worked very hard. They had these two children. The children had iPads, computers, their own bedroom. And they were emotionally detached from these children because they were so focused on giving them everything they thought they needed. And you see, it goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. Our needs are to be seen, to be heard, and to be accepted just the way we are. And a lot of us do this. We just provide the physical assets to a child, but not the emotional assets to a child. And there's a lot of pressure on being a parent. So I had so much empathy for those parents. I didn't think they were bad parents at all. It's just that our society has gone in the direction of being, we must be successful, we must have a nice house, make a lot of money, drive a car, have a good job, all of that. And our children can easily be left behind because they're in their bedroom, they're safe, they're on the computer talking to their friends. Well, the whole time they're planning a murder. I know I'm taking that to the extreme, but they could be planning a murder, right? Or planning some sort of revenge or learning about things that are way beyond their ability. The brain isn't fully formed to process the nuances of emotions and everything until we're about 26.
Yeah.
And he was like 13 or 14. And then there was the incel part, the involuntary celibacy and the dislike of women. And people, I hope I don't offend anybody by saying this, but if you don't emotionally attune and connect to your children, then you create a space for people like, Andrew Tate to come in and be an influence on your child. And there the child goes into all the, physical assets again, money, fame, cars, chicks, all of that. And it's just this terrible, terrible cycle that's spiraling. And we have a lot of fatherless children.
Yeah, and kids, especially young boys, will try any way to reach for a parent figure. And sometimes it's gonna be Andrew Tate, someone is gonna be whoever is gonna be, because that need has to be filled, has to be met. And if
Yeah,
no one's gonna do it, whoever is the loudest will
that's right.
do. And that can have, well, the repercussions that it had in the series. I'm wondering, are there any other ways that modern parenting is contributing in raising narcissistic kids?
Well, the thing that impacts the most on children, just to go back for a sec to the Andrew Tate and what you were talking about, we are tribal. Humans are tribal. That, in fact, if you look back, tribes were probably the healthiest. That was probably the healthiest time for humans because it was a community of lots of different ages. The child was passed around. His feet hardly touched the ground for much better reasons when it was young. It was passed to older people, wisdom, younger. There was two of the most healing things for a human being is to sing together in community and to dance together in community. And we just did that, right? We don't have that anymore. I'll tell you something that's really led to narcissism is the Industrial Revolution. Now, the Industrial Revolution was very good. A lot of great things came out of it. But what happened was people left their tribe. Let's say they were living in a rural area, a rural community, and they had all the things that I just mentioned. And they then broke away, individually broke away, went into the big city or the town to get better jobs, to have a better life. And there's nothing wrong with that, except that it really splintered families. And it created, certainly, I'm American, we have this term rugged individualism. So it really created this rugged individualism. And then it created a hierarchy. And it goes back to the 1%. So you have this hierarchy of, the person at the top that is owning the factory or whatever, making all the money, and the rest of us are worker bees, right? And we're never, ever going to get, most of us are never, ever going to get to the top. So those people at the top are like, you know, fantastic, wonderful, successful, um, promoted, applauded, all of that. And it creates this divide. So we're no longer this tribe, we're no longer cohesive. It's them and us, or them, yeah, as I say, or that one person and then the rest of us. So things like that, there's other reasons, but things like that have really contributed to this rugged individualism, this entrepreneurship, which is great. I'm an entrepreneur, so I, can't put that down too much, but it's how we treat the people that we coexist with that makes the difference. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So basically, this lack of community and becoming more separated and individualized, yeah,
Yeah,
it definitely affects community. Is something I think very often as I grow older, and not only how will I raise my kids at some point, but when you lack a sense of community in your immediate vicinity, then you're going to start looking for that sense of community online
yeah,
into different fringe groups. And perhaps for a second, you're going to fit into a fringe community for whatever reason. It's going to make you feel good, seen, or whatever, but that group might be very wrong for you, might be very bad for you in the long term. So I totally think of community quite
yeah.
often, and for the reasons that you just mentioned.
Well, think of gangs. Gangs are
That's what
surrogate
exactly it.
families.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a young boy who, doesn't have a lot of masculine energy in his life. He doesn't have the guidance of how to manage his rage, or, how to, because a father gives a child different things than the mother gives in terms of guidance, right? I think we can agree on that. So, there he is in a fairly female dominated world. Not his fault, not the mother's fault, but there may be the mother and the sister and the grandmother, and then he goes to school. It's changing now, but in the past there was many more female teachers than male teachers. So a lot of the energy was female, and so then, somebody says to him, hey, you do me this favor, I'll buy you a pair of shoes, trainers, whatever. And they do it. And then you know how that goes. They start getting more and more involved, but they feel seen. They feel heard. They feel accepted. And they're being groomed, but they're too young to understand that. And it feels like a family, and a lot, gangs will have a lot of masculine energy. And the boy needs that. He needs some masculine energy in his life. That's just a fact.
I want to go back to you said to the 1% and the likes of Andrew Tate. Is the cockiness we often associate with narcissism confidence, or is it a mere armor?
Mm.
Because to me, these people are simply not strong. Quite the opposite, they are the most vulnerable among us, fighting not to feel hurt, one day at a time.
Oh, that's such a great question. I'm so glad you asked it. They are 100% the most insecure person in the room, because it comes from woundedness. So the child on this end of the spectrum that didn't get their needs met and has to go out into the world and take is very wounded. So I have a lot of empathy for, I was raised by a narcissistic father. I married a narcissist, which is not uncommon, because it's familiar. And there's been others in my life. And I can see, there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of anger once when I began to realize it from in both of those relationships. But when I really started doing this work, I began to understand and have compassion for them, because they can appear to be very evil, but they're not. I mean, that's not how they started. Okay. And the same with the golden child. The golden child didn't ask for that. The golden child didn't ask to be put on a pedestal and to be treated as if the world revolved around that child. So they have been wounded at a very young age. And Dr. Bessel van der Kolk says that, because I work a lot with childhood developmental trauma, and he says that childhood developmental trauma is laid down in the first 3 years of our lives, because it's when we're pre-verbal. And I completely agree with that. It's very insidious. It's very under the radar. It's not like big T trauma, earthquakes, fires, sexual abuse. They all contribute to trauma as well. But these are the day-to-day things like neglect, emotional neglect. Maybe the child grows up with a family member who has a substance abuse addiction, right? Or any kind of addiction. There may be there'll be mental health issues like suicide, bipolar, we could go on and on. So the child normalizes this very dysfunctional environment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just truly sad. It's very
It's
sad.
it's it's so sad. And I have an Instagram account where I talk about this a lot, and sometimes people literally shout at me, in capital letters, like, I don't feel sorry for them, they're monsters. And now I never use the word forgiveness, because forgiveness is such a personal journey.
Yeah.
But I
Accept it.
believe that if we have more understanding for them and a little bit of compassion from afar, and I'm talking about from a distance, don't get involved with them again, it sets you free. And
Yeah.
don't you want to be set free? There's been
Absolutely.
enough time spent with that person where you've been controlled by them. So it's about setting yourself free.
Yeah. Speaking of your Instagram, your most watched reel on Instagram is about the 7 peculiar traits of a narcissist, and it almost has 1 million views. Why do you think people are so drawn to this content? Has it really been this rise of narcissism in modern society that people are attracted, or is it simply that relationships have become very dysfunctional, and so people people conflate their selfishness in their relationships with narcissism, but they could simply, maybe they're just failing to see that they're in a bad relationship with someone not
Yeah,
right for them.
absolutely. And on one of my reels, I actually say, because I don't really like labels. I know I'm sitting here talking about narcissism, but I don't like labels because I think they shut things down, and I think people begin to live to labels. Like if somebody says they have ADHD, which is a completely different conversation. You don't have ADHD. You are not ADHD. It is a response to your environment, right? So if you say to somebody you have ADHD, and I hear it all the time, they're like, I did that because I have ADHD. And it's like,
It's just an excuse.
no, it's not a straight line to it. It's much more nuanced to it. And you can do things for yourself. You don't just need to medicate, but that's another podcast, perhaps. Back to your question. People are fascinated by it right now. They really are fascinated by narcissism. And yeah, those reels, there's another one that's got like 2 million views, I think, about, I can't remember, it's 5 things, whatever. And I didn't think they'd be that popular. But I think that certainly dating at the moment, because I work a lot with millennials and Gen Zs. That's what I tend to attract. So I'm hearing about dating. I'm hearing about relationships. I'm hearing about how difficult it is out there. And one of the things I hear a lot is, I know I was in a relationship with a narcissist and now I'm not going to date anymore because I don't want to do that again. I'm going to attract another narcissist. And when they say that, what they fail to understand it's not about them. It's about the relationship with yourself that needs the healing,
Right.
not them.
Right.
And back to what I was saying, it's not about calling somebody a narcissist. If you are in a relationship that is toxic, get out. We don't have to label it. And it's not, when I say toxic, it's not that, oh, you're the problem and I'm okay. No, 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 no. I was raised by a narcissistic father, as I said, and I married a narcissist, and I was part of the problem.
Yeah.
I've been on my healing journey. I have my therapist where I do my healing work so that I don't. And I said earlier that I'm a recovering people pleaser. So being a people pleaser for an empath is it's the perfect target for a narc, right? So
Yeah.
I fed right into the need of the narc. So it's up to me to do my healing work and work with my inner child and my personality adaptations so that I don't become a target again. And that I also, emotionally evolve. So there's the narc, and I'm up here swimming past. So, they don't see me, or maybe they see me and they're like, no, 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 that's not going to be easy. That's going to be difficult. She's more self-aware. And that's all we can do, is we can become more self-aware. So when people say, I can't meet any good men or women and they're all losers, well, I think you got to rethink that, because this is what I said to my therapist years ago. I said, all the men I meet are losers. And she said, Now who's the common denominator in all of these relationships?
Thank you for saying that.
Yes, and I was.
Thank you for
You
saying
got
that.
to own this stuff. We can't continue to blame other people for relationships that don't work. And I promise you that there are always red flags and we ignore them. Always.
Yeah. This happened to me yesterday. I was with a person, and so me and this other man, we're both single, and we start talking about dating. And so we're both from Albania, and he starts listing all these labels like, Albanian girls are like this, like, stop trying to find an Albanian girl. I'm like, okay. Oh, but British women are like this, so you don't want to be around that. Mate, so far you've excluded almost everyone. You need to stop putting labels and generalizing that everyone fits in this category, all Albanian women or British women, because then next time you're gonna meet one of these women or even men, immediately you're going to jump into conclusions and treat this person in a way that is very relevant to the idea you formed in your head. And you might be losing on the jackpot of your life. That might be the person for you. But
Mm,
because from the moment you meet that person and you say, oh, hi, I'm whatever, Lucy from Albania, you will get into that state of mind. It was like, oh, all Albanian girls are narcissistic, or all are
yep.
this. So that is so harmful to us. That is so harmful to us. And it just happened yesterday. I was thinking
There you
about
go.
it. Yeah.
Well, what that guy's doing, if I may say, and so many people do, is hey, it's not me, Jack. It's you. You know, you're the problem. I'm okay. And we're not okay. None of us are okay. We're all carrying wounds. Some are large, some are small. But that type of person, I'm not saying him specifically, but that type of person will continue to do that until there's some sort of intervention, like a therapeutic intervention, or maybe they read a book or they listen to a podcast and they go, let me think about that a little bit differently. And that's when you can have a shift. And it really does take a sort of a mindset shift of, and that's what that my therapist did for me. She went from me blaming everybody out there and why they were all losers, and not taking any responsibility for my behavior, to ah, I need to come back inside and do some work, move some things around, do some healing, and then go back out into the world being more, you know, attractive, not necessarily physically, but emotionally attractive to a person. Not have those barriers that your friend, that's what I would call, he has quite strong boundaries, very rigid
Yeah.
boundaries, and not terribly positive ones.
Exactly.
And you know what that is? That's a protective part of him because he's been hurt.
Yeah. That's how it goes. Michelle, is there any good use for narcissists in society?
That's a
Maybe
great.
we need some. I don't know.
We need all kinds to make the world go round.
Fair enough.
Definitely we
Fair
do.
enough.
Um, yeah, they get a lot done. They get a lot done. They, I'm trying to think of an example, but if you think of leaders of countries, there's enough people that like that person to elect them, right? And
Hmm.
they can be totally narcissistic. In fact, I think it requires a level of narcissism to be in that
Perhaps.
position
Perhaps.
because you have to be ruthless. You have to have a like Teflon, that everything just doesn't touch you. You just shed it. It doesn't make any difference to you. You don't really care. And I've met these people. I mean, I've not met like lots of leaders of but I've met narcissists in my work that didn't know they were narcissists. Okay, so they might be in a couple, and I've actually had people bring me their partner saying they're narcissistic, but actually they're not. It's the person that is. And by the way, I never call a person out because that's
Yeah.
the last thing. FYI to any listeners, never call a narcissist unless you want to be very hurt by
Doesn't sound
them.
like a good idea, no.
They might
No.
punch you or something else. So yeah, they have a purpose. Um, Really, the best thing to do is acknowledge what they are. You don't have to label it. You don't have to call somebody a narcissist. And just to say, I should have made this really clear from the beginning. I talk about narcissistic personality style, which is different than NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder. Now, narcissistic personality disorder is diagnosed by a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I am neither. Okay, so I don't do those kind of diagnoses, and I don't go into that area. I mean, of course, I meet them and I probably work with them, but I'm not actively in that area of diagnosing somebody with NPD. I talk more about narcissistic personality disorder. So statistically, and these I love these statistics, because how can we prove anything, right? Does a narcissist come up and go, hey, I'm a narcissist, put me in the calculation of statistics? Statistically, 1% to 2% of the population are NPD. But how do we know? There could be many more. Yeah. And then about 1 in 5, 1 in 6 people are narcissistic personality style. And that is what I talk about. They are, they're among us. So if you think of 5 people in your life, one of them is bound to be narcissistic personality style, which is quite high. Now, when you go into the areas of military, Hollywood, medicine, C-suite, I can name some more, it goes to 50+%, 50+%.
That's a lot, yeah.
Because those arenas, those careers, again, attract and promote that kind of personality, right? I lived in LA. I can vouch for that. It's
most of Hollywood.
Yeah, it is, and it's part of surviving Hollywood and doing well in Hollywood, so. Which I found, just this may be of interest, I found really difficult, so I left. I that energy just
sounds exhaustive, really.
Rubbed up against me in the wrong way. Now, they're not wrong and I'm not right. Yeah. It's just that, once again, if there is a toxicity in the relationship or in the city or country or whatever, get out.
Exactly.
You don't have to analyze it. Just become aware. Awareness is the first step to healing. So we need to be more aware. Most of us are asleep. I'm also a hypnotherapist, so I can state this. 90 to 95% of our day, we're in a hypnotic state, eyes open, hypnotic state. And all that means is we're doing the same thing over and over. Like, you don't need instructions to open the door. You know how to open a door. So that's a muscle memory, automatic response, default position. That's not conscious. That's in your unconscious. Eating, driving a car, making love, whatever it is that you've learned to do. So we're not conscious enough. Most of us are not conscious enough to see the red flags, acknowledge the red flags, and say, you know what, this isn't right for me. We just kind of fall asleep at the wheel and get in the relationship. And for a lot of us, and I'll own this as a woman, I think a lot of women do this more than men, is we try to fix people. Oh, I'm going to change him. I'm going to change her.
Yeah. Good luck.
When they meet me and fall in love with me, it's going to be different. I know that they've destroyed all their other partners, but I'm going to be different.
Yeah, that reminds me of a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say someone recognizes all these traits in himself or herself.
Mm-hmm.
How can someone work on becoming less of a narcissist?
It's a great question. However, it's not that simple in my opinion, to, like, let's say you listen to this podcast and hear these things, go, oh, I'm a narcissist, so let me figure out what to do. They have parts of their personality missing, and you can't plug them back in. And one of those parts is empathy. They can appear to be empathetic.
I see, yeah.
But so I'm going to give you simple little examples. Let's say apologies are great examples. Let's say I offended you. I said something to you yesterday that really offended you. And I've thought about it, and I've come back today and I said, I'm really sorry what I said to you yesterday. But you have no idea what's going on in my life. I've just lost my job. My mother is ill. I have no money left. So what happens with the narc is you'll get an apology, but it will always come back to them. Everything comes back to them. Because remember, they're the most insecure person in the relationship and in the room. So it's got to be about them because that feeds their very delicate ego. So they don't have the empathy, and they don't have the sort of self-awareness of, they don't have the awareness of self and how they impact on other people. So if you don't have that, it's kind of hard to plug it back in. And yes, some people that have realized they're narcissistic or NPD do go to therapy, and it does move the needle. But I just want to manage people's expectations. It doesn't move the needle that much. There's a quite a famous little story. Well, it's a story I stumbled upon on YouTube years ago. There was a psychologist that did research on death row about whether these people waiting to be executed were narcissists. And we're talking about NPD because, very high level. And so he did a form, that people were having to fill in this form, quite comprehensive questions. And he did one for himself as like a baseline, let's say. So 29 forms come back, and his team go through everything, and 29 of them present as narcissistic. And he's like, well, how did that happen? Because where's my form? And he looked at his team and said, am I a narcissist? and I'm simplifying this for the sake of time. And they were like, yes, sir. You are. And he's like, well, no one said anything, but you go to a narcissist and say you're a narcissist. That's certainly when they're your boss, So he goes home and he has dinner with his wife, and there's a bottle of wine on the table and they're talking. And he tells her about his day. And he says, so darling, do you know I'm a narcissist? She said, yes, dear. And he said, so, and again, very simplistic. He said, so what is that? How does that show up? I mean, what do I do? And she says, well, there's a bottle of wine on the table and you pour yourself a drink and you put it back down. And he said, yeah. She said, well, you might want to offer it to other people. Again, very simple thing. It's much, much bigger than that. Yeah. So he was so charming. I really like this guy. He got a pad and a pen and he made notes of how to be less narcissistic, like how to greet people, how to socialize with people.
Bless him.
And he got better, but he never got better. You know what I mean? He trained himself to integrate in society in a less narcissistic way. So
that's fascinating.
We don't always know that we're narcissistic. And believe me, I have gone through a lot with myself, like, am I narcissistic? There used to be this adage that it's quite funny now to hear. It's like, well, if you ask yourself if you're a narcissist, you're definitely not a narcissist. Well, I'm sorry to say it's not that simple. there's a lot of nuance to it. Do you make everything about yourself? Do you actually care? There's a very famous guy on Instagram, Dr. Sam Vaknin. I don't know if you've come across him. You probably haven't if you've not done any, if you haven't been interested or not done a lot of work around this yet. And I had the pleasure of doing a YouTube with him. And it was very, very specific what I could and couldn't ask him. He's a twice diagnosed MPD, not voluntarily. It's to do with a court case or something. I couldn't ask any questions. But he said to me, he gave an example. He said, so there I am. He's a professor. I'm standing in front of a group of people and I'm talking. And this is a classic narcissistic statement. He goes, and they look at me and think, good looking man, smart.
That sounds like it sounds exactly what I think it would.
Yes. And, looking at him going, oh, good looking man, smart, authoritarian, he has authority and all of that. And he said, but I am standing here looking at them and there's nothing here. I don't care about them. I have no emotional connection to them. And it's like this vacancy behind his eyes. And to hear that from a person that's actually experiencing that it was mind-blowing, because I can't understand that, which is what you'll hear a lot in narcissistic relationships. You'll hear a target say, I don't understand how they could say that. I don't understand how they can do it. And you never will, and that's a good thing because your brain is wired differently. And that's what
Fascinating.
Sam is. He's wired differently than I am. Doesn't make him bad, because it will have to do with his childhood.
Fascinating. Although this case sounds to me slightly more on the more grandiose style of narcissism, I want to also talk about the communal narcissism because this is becoming ever so more prevalent with social media. So these are the people who film themselves giving food and money to homeless people so that they
Yeah.
can bathe in this admiration they get online. However, is there any way to tell the difference between being altruistic and being a secret narcissist?
Um, yes, but it takes space and time. It's not quick. You really need to track people if you want to. You need to track them on, let's say, on their social media account. And you have to keep following it. I mean, it's very wrong for me or anybody to look at somebody and say you're a narcissist. I can still sit with clients, especially couples, and have an initial feeling about something, and then it will change as I work with them over time.
Right.
So the same applies to everybody, whether they're on Instagram or YouTube or TikTok. Track them. They may do narcissistic things, and yes, they may be all made up at the dog shelter, feeding, homeless dogs or whatever. But that might just be a one off. Give them grace and space to see how they live their lives. And you don't know them anyway, do you? I mean, they're just this two-dimensional person on screen. So you really don't know. But if you get a feeling about it, as I said earlier, we don't need to label it. Just cut it off. If you get a feeling that somebody you're following on Instagram is narcissistic, stop watching them.
Exactly. There's no point. What's
Just
the point? Yeah, just stop.
unfollow them.
Yeah, yeah. A common practice in the modern world is also the mischaracterization and overdiagnosing of pathologies and mental disorders, especially
Mm,
among Gen Z.
yep.
Are there any signs or symptoms or personality traits that would trick people into believing that they know a narcissist, when in reality the individual may simply exhibit behaviors and traits of some other condition?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That works both ways. They could be narcissistic, bipolar, ADHD, autistic. It's not a one thing. It's not just one lane. And it goes the other way. Some people may be bipolar, or they may have avoidant attachment style that makes them look very cold and shut down. But that's not necessarily narcissistic. That's fear of being hurt. That's what I mean. You can't jump into these diagnoses or these labels and say, oh, they did this, this, and that, so they're narcissistic. I would recommend that if you're in a new relationship with somebody and you really think that there may be some levels of narcissism, slow it down. Because one of the biggest traits of a narcissist in a relationship in the beginning is love bombing. And it's almost too much, too soon, and too good to be true. And love bombing can last 1 hour, 1 year. There are no rules here. There are no guardrails here. There are no guidelines here. And I've seen it. I've seen, people love bomb very quick and very short. And then it goes into, there are 3 stages. I should probably mention that. So there's love bombing, which is full on, everything is about you. And the reason they do this is because what they've been doing is listening to you and hearing your vulnerabilities, because they really pay attention. And then they mirror back to you what you need. So let's say I'm in a relationship and I go and I can't accept a compliment and I feel that I'm like the most unattractive person in the room. The narc would probably go, oh, you're the most beautiful, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, really? Oh, really? And that would be uncomfortable at first. And then they would double down and double down and double down. And you begin to believe it because it's what you've always wanted to hear. So they figure this out because they're very astute. They're not stupid people. So the first stage is love bombing. And that is when they reel you in. They're reeling you in, and they do it as long as they need to get you. Some people could call it grooming. It's another form of that. Um, then the second phase is called devaluation, and that's where all those lovely phrases come up, like gaslighting, flying monkeys, breadcrumbing. We could go on and on and on. And that is usually the longest phase. Not always, but the longest phase. So they chip away at you. And so, for example, if you're in the love bombing stage with a narcissist, usually sex is off the charts amazing because it's all about you, right? So they're going to please you, do everything they can. And then sex becomes transactional on the devaluation stage. And they use it as leverage.
Mm.
So almost, maybe they don't say it, or maybe they do. They almost say, if you do that for me, we'll have sex. Because you're now hooked, right? You know what you've had. It's amazing. But okay, before I say this, I'll just finish. So the third stage is discard. So they devalue you, devalue you, devalue you. And this is when they want to remove you from the supply wheel because you no longer have what they need. So they're going to remove you, or not necessarily remove you, just like go to somebody else and get it from them. So a lot of narcissists will have more than one relationship going on at a time, a sexual relationship or even a loving relationship. They can have 2 lives, maybe more. This was my experience with my husband. So I know this to be a lived experience. And because I call the target, the person that is in relationship with the narc, is so hooked on them, they stay and they put up with more and more and more. So if they don't leave, the narc leaves them, and not forever. They might still stay married to them or in a relationship with them, but they will, on business trips, they'll be with somebody else. They might even have a family somewhere else. It's not unusual. Psychopaths do this as well, and so do sociopaths. So going back to your other question, it's not necessarily narcissism, but this does show up in narcissism. Discard is they're done with you. But there's a fourth stage that doesn't always happen, but does. And it's based on a British vacuum cleaner called a Hoover, and it's hoovering. So they come back for you like a vacuum cleaner to suck you back in, right? And they start the whole process again. But it's never like the first time because the person you met was never real. Never real.
Sounds so manipulative. The whole, like, there's some master manipulators.
Oh, it is.
That's what they sound like.
It is. But when that's your oxygen, when you need all these people to keep you alive, you get pretty good at it, right?
You have to.
You know how to do it. And if you don't, you'll learn. You really learn. And it becomes pretty seamless, and that's why it's so hard to spot them. There's a great expression, I didn't say it, I wish I had, because it just sums the whole thing up with narcissists. Narcissistic relationships are best seen in the rear view mirror as you're leaving than in the windscreen or the windshield. We don't know when we're in them. Most of us don't know when we're in them. We only know retrospectively if we're lucky.
Exactly.
Because if you're not lucky, if you haven't worked it out or somebody hasn't helped you to see it, you'll repeat it.
It might sound like these narcissists are the strong ones in these relationships and in society, but to me, it just seems that there's so much incongruency with what narcissists want and how they deal with their needs. They want to be loved, but they feel vulnerability. They want to feel special, but they doubt their self-worth. They seek admiration, but cannot tolerate intimacy. It's just the ultimate self-sabotage. It sounds awful to be them, actually, not nice. It sounds...
Oh, it is awful. It is awful.
Connection and then always putting others away to protect themselves when they cannot get any more needs from them. It's just awful.
I'm going to bring up 2 points to respond to that, which I didn't mention. So the first 3 years of our lives, we are pre-verbal and we're becoming more independent. So we individuate and separate from the parent figure. And in the first 7 years of our life is when we really develop our personality, which is rarely genetic. There's some temperament traits like highly sensitive person, various other things that can be hardwired, but the majority of our personality is, as I said, in response. So what happens is let's say the narc, I'm going to use this as a time frame, doesn't grow beyond age 3 emotionally. So they're stuck. And so here you are, you've got this 3-year-old energy this personality adaptation. You may have developed other parts of your life, but
Yeah.
your then body grows, you get a beard like you have a house, a couple kids, and you're still this little kid. This part of you is still this underdeveloped, emotionally underdeveloped child. So that person is in a lot of pain because they're frozen in that space. And that's when a therapist can help. The thing I didn't say about therapy with narcs, there's a very interesting little aside. A narcissist will also go to a therapist to learn how to be a better narcissist because
No
they
way.
will choose a therapist that doesn't understand narcissism. And they'll say things like, well, my partner says that I'm very, aggressive in an argument. How can I do better? So the therapist will be love bombed by them, devalued by the whole thing can repeat.
Evil bunch.
Yes, but to respond to something else, another aspect of it is there's something called narcissistic collapse, and they eventually collapse. They run out of supply, and they get older. They lose their looks. They might lose their money. They might be physically incapacitated. They have health issues, whatever, and they end up, not every one of them, but a lot of them end up very depressed, very broken people because they've never emotionally evolved from that 3-year-old narcissistic energy. It's not who they are completely. They have hopefully other aspects of their lives that they've developed. Maybe they've got a great education, they've contributed to society, but there's still that energy underlying about poor me, no one understands me. If only I was given these opportunities, I could be so much more successful, I would have more money, whatever.
What a fascinating topic. All right, Michele, last question. What do you want to be remembered for?
I thought you were going to say, what do you want to be when you grow up?
No. I have this last question I always ask to everyone as a tradition, and that's, what do they want to be remembered for?
That's great. For me, it's easy. I have a successful one-to-one therapeutic practice, and I have realized even before COVID and all of that not everybody can afford therapy, right? And why should they have to? I think the stuff should be out there for the masses without people having to pay for it. So what I'd like to be remembered for is that in addition to having one-to-ones, that's one thing, but I like now one-to-manys. That's why I have an Instagram channel. That's why I do workshops, in-person workshops. I do online master classes and things like that. And most of my stuff is free or very, very low cost because I want to be remembered for spreading the word and saving at least one person from not making the mistake that I made. And there were children involved. And that's who I really feel for, are the children involved in any of these relationships. So I'm very blessed that I do get messages from people saying, thank you for saying that. It woke me up. I'm now, that is what gets me up in the morning. And that's what I would like to be remembered for.
That's so nice. Michele, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be invited onto your podcast, and great questions, really great questions.
Thank you.